Hi guys, we're starting chapter 4 here and we're going to make some videos to kind of jump into what we're going to be learning about. So today's essential question is, how can I write an equation of a line? So something we want to do in algebra is kind of become experts on lines, and you're going to hear me say that a lot in class. And one of the things we really want to be able to do is write an equation of a line. So here's what you need to know. The equation that we mostly use is y equals mx plus b. Hopefully you've heard that before in class before you've seen this video, but maybe not. Maybe that's brand new information to you. Y equals mx plus b. Now I put the m and the b in colors because m and b are really not variables. They're actually numbers. And we're going to talk about what those numbers mean. But we have a name for this, and it's called the slope-intercept form of a line. Slope-intercept form. So m stands for your slope, hence the name slope-intercept, and b stands for your y-intercept. So those two numbers in your equation represent what's the slope of the line and what's the y-intercept of the line. So slope and y-intercept. So here's our first problem. Write an equation of a line given this information. And we're going to try a few of these. So here's part A. Given the slope is equal to 3 and the y-intercept is equal to -1, write the equation of the line. Now this is going to be what I call the easiest level of these problems. There's kind of like an easy, medium, and then a hard level. This is pretty easy because the information given to us is the slope and is the y-intercept. It's the two important pieces of y equals mx plus b. So we now know that the m is given to us, it's 3, and we know the y-intercept, which is the b, is -1. So we already know the equation. It's y equals 3x and then -1. And that's our answer, y equals 3x minus 1. Let's try one that we have to work a little harder at. So we're going to do a second question now. We'll call it B. And we want to write an equation of a line when we know this. We know the slope is equal to 2, and the line is passing through 7, 4. So we know the slope is 2, and we know the line is crossing through a point on the graph at 7, 4. Now I'm thinking, okay, y equals mx plus b. I still know the m. I know the slope is equal to 2, so we have some information. But what I don't know is what b is equal to. I do not know the y-intercept. That's my mystery that I need to solve. But I have some helpful information. I know that on the graph, the line passes through 7, 4. That's pretty helpful information because on the graph, that's an x and a y coordinate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that x equals 7 and that y equals 4 coordinate, and I'm going to replace that into my equation for the x and the y. So we're going to change y to be equal to 4 and the x equal to 7. We got to make sure we put them in the right order. And then here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to rewrite this. I have 4 equals 2 times 7 plus b. I still don't know the b. But now I can easily throw a line down the middle and I can solve for that b. So let's do some quick math here. 2 times 7 is 14. If I take that 14 away to the other side, 4 take away 14, it's going to be a -10. Now I know my b value. -10 is equal to b. So back to my equation, I can replace b now over here with the -10. So my equation is going to be y equals 2x and a -10. And there's my answer. So that one took a little bit more work. I had to use that coordinate point to replace the x and the y. But then once we figure that out, we can find our b value, figure out what that y-intercept is. Okay, so let's look at level C here. Question C is going to take it to the next step. I want to write an equation of a line that passes through -3, 5 and 5, -11. So I've got this line passing through these 2 points on a graph. I do not know the slope and I do not know the y-intercept. I'm missing both facts. Now I got to do a little work. But what I do know is that these points are at an x and a y coordinate on the graph. So I have 2 xy points. And what I'm going to do to label them is I put the xy under them, but I'm going to add something else. I'm going to put a little 1. And the way you say this is you say x sub 1, x1, y1. And I'm going to put a 2. And what those numbers represent is that this is the first point, x1, y1, and this is the second point on the graph, x2, y2. It almost looks like when you write your exponent powers, you know how you put the number up small and high? It's the opposite of that. You put the number down low. So when you're typing on a computer, we call the exponent powers, we call them superscript because they're super up high. And when they're low like this, we call them subscript. They're down low. So x1, y1, x2, y2. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to solve for the slope using the slope formula. Delta y over delta x. The change in the y's and the change in the x's, find your slope on a graph. That's that rise and run. Delta y, if you've never seen this before, is a way of writing the rise, and delta x is the way of writing the run. And that little triangle symbol, I keep calling it delta because it's a Greek symbol. It's the delta symbol. It stands for change. It means for the rise, we find the change in the y values. For the run, we find the change in the x values. So delta y over delta x is another way of saying rise and run. And we're going to find that rise and run here in a minute. But I want you to notice something in your notes. I want you to write down that what that little triangle actually stands for is change in y and change in x. We're talking about what's the rise and what's the run. What's the change in the y's and the change in the x's. Okay, so I think I've said that enough. So here's the math that we're going to do now. We're going to use a formula. To find the change in the y's, we're going to subtract them. We're going to take the y2 number and we're going to subtract the y1. To find the change in the x's, we're going to subtract them. In the same order, we're going to do x2 minus x1. So we're going to look at our numbers and we're going to replace them into this formula. y2 minus y1, we'll look at the y values over here. The y values are 5 and negative 11. So we're going to take negative 11 and then we're going to take away the 5. And then let's look at the x values. The x values, oh, it looks like I did my math already. Negative 11 minus 5 is negative 16. Okay, so the change in the y's is negative 16. Now we'll look at the x values. The x values are negative 3 and 5. So we're going to take them away. We're going to do 5, take away the negative 3. 5, take away the negative 3. Now taking away a negative is like adding. So it's really like 5 plus 3. So 5 plus 3 is 8. Now we're down to this rise over run. So my rise over run is negative 16 over 8. But if I divide it, because it's a fraction, 16 divided by 8 is 2. So my delta y delta x is equal to a negative 2. That's my rise and run. Negative 2, that's my slope. So we just found our m value. M is equal to negative 2. Whew, okay, so we did all that work to find our m value. So now we know for y equals mx plus b that it's going to be y equals negative 2x. We still don't know the b value. We don't know the y-intercept. So we still have some more work to do. So here's what I'm going to do to figure that out. I'm going to pick one of my points. You can pick the x1, y1, or you can pick the x2, y2. It actually doesn't matter. Either one's going to work. I chose to box and use the x1, y1. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take that negative 3 and that 5, and I'm going to put it into the equation. X is going to be negative 3, y is going to be 5, and we're going to solve for that b value. So let's put a line down the middle. Let's clean this up. 5 is equal to negative 2, that's the slope, times negative 3 plus b. We don't know the b. Now negative 2 times 3 is a positive 6. So we have 6 plus the b is equal to 5. Take that 6 away to the other side, subtract it. 5 take away 6 is a negative 1. So we get b is equal to negative 1. So we've got our b value. So now that we know what b is equal to, now that we know it's negative 1, we've got our equation. It's y equals negative 2x, because negative 2 is the slope, minus 1. And there's our answer. So we just did 3 questions, A, B, C. A was the easiest. The slope and the y-intercept were just told to us, and we just put it in the equation. The second problem, B, was a little harder. The slope was given, but not the b value, not the y-intercept. We had to work for that. And then this last one took the most work because we had to find the slope first, then the b value. Okay, guys, so it is your turn to try. For your you try, I'm going to give you 3 questions on A, B, C, and your job is to write an equation of a line passing through or with the given values. So here's part A. Write an equation of a line with a slope of negative 3 and a y-intercept of 4. Pause the video and go ahead and try that. Now this is the fast one. The slope and the y-intercept are given to you, so you probably barely had to pause this video to solve this one. We already know the m and the b, so y equals negative 3x plus 4 is our answer. And I hope you're thinking in your head like, yes, thumbs up, I got that answer too. Let's try one that's a little harder. So here's the you try for part B. The slope is negative 1/2, and it's passing through a point on the graph at 2, 4. Pause the video and take some time to figure this one out. This one takes a little more work. Okay, so you're unpausing the video. You've tried this problem, I hope, and now we're going to check your solution. So here's what we know. We know the m value, which is great. We know it's negative 1/2. We have a point on the graph, which I'm going to call x and y. So my y equals is going to be y equals negative 1/2 x plus b. I don't know the b value, but I'm going to solve for the b by replacing the x and y with the 2 and the 4. Notice the order. The 4 is the y, the 2 is the x. You got to put them in the right spot. Then I just got some math to do. So 4 equals negative 1/2 times 2 plus b. Let's do that negative 1/2 times 2. What do we know? Well, negative 1 times 2 is negative 2. So it's kind of like I have negative 2 over 2. And negative 2 divided by 2 is a negative 1, really. So it's negative 1, and then it's plus b. So 4 equals negative 1 plus b. And then I'll add that 1 to the other side of the equation. I'll do 4 plus 1, and I'll get 5. 5 equals b. So now we have our b value. So here's my equation. Y equals negative 1/2 x. That was our slope. Plus 5. That's our y-intercept. And there's our solution. I hope that's what you got too. Okay, last one. Your turn to try. Can you write an equation of a line passing through negative 2, 1 and negative 3, 5? Pause the video and see if you can do the last one. Okay, the last one takes a lot of work, so let's unpause the video and check your answer here. So negative 2, 1 and negative 3, 5 are points on the graph. They're xy points. And what we're going to do is we're going to calculate and find the slope first. We're going to find that rise and run. We're going to do that using this formula, delta y over delta x. That's rise and run. And we're going to do y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1. This is one of those formulas you're going to have to kind of stick in your head and pretty much memorize. So we're going to get that stuck in your head this chapter pretty quickly. So here's my x and y points. I'm going to label them x1, y1, x2, y2. And I'm going to take those numbers and just put them in my equation. So let's see, for the y's, I would have to do 5, take away 1. And for the x's, I would have to do negative 3, take away negative 2. Now the top part's easy. 5 take away 1 is 4. At the bottom, I have to go negative 3, and then I have to change it to plus 2. So I get 4 over negative 1. And 4 divided by negative 1 is negative 4. There's our m value. Whew, okay, so y is equal to now negative 4x, but we don't know the plus b. So we're going to solve for the plus b by putting one of the points in. I'm going to choose the first one just out of habit. I'm going to put negative 2 and 1 in for the x and the y. So I'm going to have 1 equals negative 4 times negative 2 plus b. And then I'll put a line down the middle and I'll solve for b. Now negative 4 times negative 2 is 8. I'll take the 8 to the other side, take that away. That's going to give me a negative 7. That's my b value. So my equation is y equals negative 4x, and now it's minus 7. We found the y-intercept, and we have our solution. Now you're checking your answer, so I hope you have the same answer, but if you don't, look through your math and see where did you make your mistake. I really hope you're noticing how organized all my work is. You want your work to be just as organized. Each step is kind of clearly shown. I'm labeling, I'm putting equal signs, all really important stuff. Okay, so moving on. Now that you know how to write the equation of the line when you're given information, I want to look at this last problem here. Write an equation of a line passing through negative 2, negative 5, and 2, 1. Now, I know that this is kind of like the last example in the last you try, where we have to find delta y, delta x, and find the slope. But instead, I'm going to graph it. I'm going to go for a different strategy. What if I decided just to graph the line and find the equation? So if I set up a graph, and you might have to pause the video to grab your ruler and set up your graph, but there's only 2 points to put on the graph. negative 2, negative 5, which would be like negative 2, negative 5, which would be kind of down in that third quadrant. And then 2, 1, so over 2, up 1. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to put those on my graph. I'm going to label them 2. And then I'm going to grab my ruler and connect them with a nice straight line. That's our line. So I'm supposed to be writing an equation, y equals mx plus b. Well, I can only do that if I find the rise and run. So let's look a little closer at this graph and let's find our rise and run with a growth triangle. The rise goes up, the run goes over, we make our triangle, and we count the units. So it looks like my rise goes up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Did I count that right? Let's try again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think so. So we got a rise of 6. And my run goes 1, 2, 3, 4 over. It looks like a run of 4. So we now know our slope is 6 over 4. So I'm going to write that down. Rise over run is equal to 6 over 4, which can be simplified. I can divide it by 2. So 6 divided by 2 and 4 divided by 2 would give me 3 halves. That's my m. That's my slope. So now I know it's y equals 3 halves x, but I don't know the y-intercept, but I'm circling it. I can see it on my graph. My y-intercept really looks like negative 2. If you used your ruler and you were really accurate with your graphing, you didn't make it sloppy, you should have the same y-intercept as me. It should be at negative 2. That's our b value. So now I know my y equals mx plus b. It's y equals 3 halves x, and then it's the negative 2 minus 2. There's our equation. So some people like to graph, and that's their way they like to find their equations. But some people like to use the delta y delta x formula and go for that strategy. You have different ways of doing this. So to kind of summarize, how can I write an equation of a line? Follow the clues to find the slope and the y-intercept. Your main job is to figure out what's m and what's b, and to read the question carefully. Use that delta y over delta x formula, or graph it if you want to graph it. You have different options. So if you can figure out how to do both, and if you could show both, that's your level 4 work right there. If you can graph it and use the delta y delta x formula, you're at that advanced high level. So we're definitely practicing this in class, and there's going to be more videos, but I hope you kind of followed along with this and it made a lot of sense. All right, thanks guys. Have a good day.